many people will be joining me, but I'm assuming everybody's doing things in life. So, interesting subject I just wanted to share to whoever will tune into this. Is anyone there? Look at this tape machine. This is a 2-inch 16 track. It's part of a company called Analogger, which is where my studio is. The owner, Thomas Scriven, has thought about the future, and he believed he needs a tape machine. So the subject of today and why I went live was a band had asked me when I'm making a record, how am I recording? And I'll be honest, most of my stuff I don't use EQ. So I'm recording drums, bass guitars, vocals, and there is 0 EQs. And that's not necessarily the normal thing. I think Al Schmitz did that. But I don't know any other way to do that because I never had a lot of expensive gear. Some Pultecs. I never had that. So I've had tape machines, consoles, and microphones. So on the subject of if you are a producer or an engineer and you're making records, how do you capture things that you don't need any EQ? Well, part of it is the magic of having things like a tape machine. Also, my friend Thomas Scriven at Analogger has a massive pedal board setup that runs into this patch bay that's all ran through switches. He can run any pedal anywhere he wants. He's running that into, where is it at? Oh, where are you, Mr. Avitas? I'm looking around here. Well, somewhere in this area, there is an Avitas preamp. I guess here's the MA5s, but he has these preamps. There they are, right there. Those preamps right there, you can run an effects pedal in the front like a loop, and you can have your mic or your line running through the unit, which is balanced. So you could almost say like it's an effects loop. Why does Thomas want that, and why did Avitas make that? It's because you can plug any pedal in line level into a balanced preamp. So for doing vocals, doing anything. So in Thomas's world, not only was he thinking about tape machines, a Mara tape machine. If you can look up Mara, they refurbish these machines. And Thomas had asked me, what should we get, a 24 or a 16? Since I know he's planning on tracking mostly going to Pro Tools, I said get a 16 because I've had a 2-inch 16 for about 10 years. And it does sound like Back in Black. It does sound like the first Van Halen, not Van Halen, Black Sabbath. It does sound early Led Zeppelin. It's amazing. And then when they talk about 2-inch tape, you're just literally looking physically 2 inches. Those are the heads. And these are broken down with 16. If it was a 24, it'd be 24, but it's always within 2-inch or 1-inch. And there's only 16 meters. So when we're talking about making records, the sky's the limit about how much money you want to make or put into your studio for making a record. So once again, the question was set to me, how do I record without any EQ? And why? I love microphones. I love the instruments. So for instance, like I said about Thomas, he's using pedals. That's his gateway to changing the sounds of every single thing he records. Now he does have really great stuff like these Pultecs and stuff. So you can, during mixing, even all these are all Brett A rolls, most of them, rare APIs. You can, through mixing, change all that stuff. But, for instance, he's got a wide variety of acoustic guitars because he's got a nylon. So let's say you don't have a lot of money and you're looking to, somewhere down your world you will do an acoustic guitar. Get a nylon string. Doesn't matter. You can get a Yamaha. Somewhere in your world you'll want to use that. He's got a Guild 12 string, and then he does have an expensive Martin, but these can be all replaced with more affordable. So when you get, like, this is Thomas's area, it's in the middle of being wired up. Ricky, the tech, has come in the last few days and he's done all the wiring. And the goal is pretty massive. When I talked a while ago about little mommy hooks, I told Thomas to buy these hooks to keep the cables off the ground. And then we designed it so these racks can all be hooked up together. I just showed you the front of them, but they're all connected and they all can be moved. And there are going to the tape machine back there. So it's kind of complicated. It is a lot of money through tech. This is Michael Beinhorn's 1057s, 1058s, 1057s. Those were all used on Super Unknown Soundgarden. Those are actually the preamps that got that drum sound. So these are for drum sounds. These were for guitars, 1058s. Here's Michael Beinhorn's BK5. Every guitar had this on it. Even the bass guitar had a BK5. So back to the subject. When you're recording, do you need EQ? Well, my philosophy is necessarily no. So I just gave you a little glimpse into the acoustic guitar. So now that we walk into where I record, that's Butch Vig's drum set. I know, weird. This is Dweezil Zappa's guitar. These ARDs are incredible amps. There was a guy, or some guy that was a tech for AC/DC in the early 2000s. I believe he made these heads for Malcolm Young and Angus Young. And then a buddy of Thomas went on tour with The Who. I want to say, who else did he work with? I'm not sure. But they didn't make a lot of these, but they had these heads, and Thomas was lucky enough to get 2 of them. And these are absolutely outstanding heads. So once again, when you talk about getting tones, you invest in a head. These are orange cabinets. I know I'm going to be all star guy, but this is actually owned by was owned by George Martin. And these went with the yards. Where is George Martin's head? There it is. That was actually owned by George Martin. But Thomas got this Jubilee, which is amazing. All right, back in the drums. Manny's going live. The question is, when you're recording, do you need EQ? And the answer is no. So I'll talk about drums. These drums are tuned. I've been lucky enough that people, when they work with me, they let me guide them through the recording process. Now, if you're starting out and you're just giving your talent away for sessions and you want to get business and you're you want to get people in, sometimes you don't have that leverage to tell them to play your drums. On the other half, most people come to me and they don't even ask me what kind of gear I have. They just want to make records gratefully with me. So we have a collage of snares, different tunings, high, low, vintage. And people that are precious about drums, you're going to have to get some stuff in there that guys are just going to bang the heck out of them. If I have a banger in, this is a brass or bronze snare. I don't care. You can hit that with a hammer. It's not going to break. So for a heavy-hitting drummer, I'll have him play that. Really quick, I'm just going to look at some questions. All right. Is anybody saying anything? Up 2 inch 16. Let's see. All right. Well, so back on the idea of not using EQ. So I don't use any EQ on the drums. Zero. Nothing. Mixing, I may put a little bit, but my thing is microphones. So I've got all these different snares to choose from, kind of tailored for the drummer. This drummer had brought in his own snare, which he had, I think, a Leedy from the 30s or 40s. This is a Ludwig. This was tuned by the drum doctor. If you don't know what the drum doctor is, it's a guy in Los Angeles that will come out. He did the drums for Metallica Black. He does Foo Fighters, you name it. They call him the drum doctor. He will tune it. He's very expensive. when Thomas set up the studio initially, before I even came in here, he had already had these drum sets tuned up. So I've actually marked the tones in the tunings. For instance, this snare is C sharp. Now you may be asking, once again, we're talking about EQ, so I'm not using an EQ, but I'm using an acoustic guitar. So I'll get an acoustic guitar, I'll turn this off, I'll put a finger here, and then I'll tap the center. Up, 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 up. So wherever that is, I'll go get an acoustic guitar, I'll find it, and that's if a drummer hasn't been banging this, and then I tune it up to C sharp. And you usually want to have the top a little lower than the bottom. So I can't really. They're almost even. This was out of a session, but generally speaking, you would have this a little bit lower than the bottom. And then the drums doctor's technique is to have the tape like this, just gaffer's tape, and then he places it on the drums accordingly how he wants it. So that's how the drum doctor does his drums. So I have this wide variety of drums, hold on, that I use. So we have tuned drums, and then now we're talking about the microphones. This microphone is Unidyne 56. It's older. I'm not sure I always believe in the hypes when everybody says you got to get an old Unidyne or an old 57. But after I got an old one, oh my God, I cannot tell you how it makes the snare cool. So I don't need EQ because this one just has a nice top to it. On the bottom, that is a Peluso P414 brass capsule in it. Oh my God, these are like copies of an EB. Affordable, under warranty, perfect. So I have, 60s, then I have current brand new Peluso. These are brand new. These are Lawtons on the toms. You don't need EQ because they have a nice snap to it. Usually if you have a dynamic, you'll probably have to EQ it a little bit because when you strike it, you may want to get a little bit more, I don't know, tone out of it, I could say. So you're going to EQ it possibly. When I use a condenser, that means most of the times I don't need to worry about that because they have wonderful top end. These have great cancellation, so you get the snap of the drum, you get this low end deepness. I have them here. And so when you talk about not EQing the drums, I'm getting away with a vintage sound on the top, huge bottom sound with this brass capsule. And this is a condenser. This is a dynamic. These are condensers. They look like a hammer. So yeah, and also when you're doing drums, you have to be aware of usually this bottom mic, you have to flip the polarity or flip it out of phase. And that usually only works on that. And then these are some vintage mics. Sometimes when you get an old mic like that, they're wired different up there, 2-pin hot, 3-pin hot, whatever the old ones were. And you have to be careful and check your polarity on those or phase. I get in an argument about what I call it. I'm just old school. I say flip the phase on it. But so yeah, so it's a combination of having control for tonal, because if I want a little bit more, like if the snare's too dark, I'll just, crank a little bit more of the bottom snare. And that gives me kind of the snap I want. The same theory in this. This is an SM98. And if I talk about kick drum, oh, I see someone asking about the C sharp. I know people talk about tuning the drums, and this is to a question. Why do you tune the snare to C sharp because of the melody or C sharp? This snare happens to sound absolutely amazing at C sharp. So tuning up or down kills it. And in I know some people like to tune drums to the songs. And I mean, I would say more in toms. Like I know if you listen to like Metallica where they'll go doo-doo, boo-doo. I mean, he has like 14 toms. They all descend or ascend. I believe they use harmonize for that. When you're in a big studio, they had an Eventide harmonizer that can tune them to the pitch you want. And I definitely think now in modern technology, you could do that. You could just down tune the drums till they're in tune. But that would be freaky on all the other mics. I end up using all these drums to make a complete picture in the mixing of the drums. So when I say this is C sharp, even if the guys are playing in C, A, D, or E, it for me it hasn't ever affected where I'm like, oh my god, that snare is out of tune. It doesn't matter as long as it has character. And all these drums, and the reason I say C sharp because C, C sharp, or D can get away with this snare sounding its best. So that's kind of my theory. And I just want the drum to sound its best. If I tune this to a key that the song was in, this particular snare may not have good body, low end, or crack. So then I would have to find another snare. That's an 80s Black Beauty. That's used on the Chavez Ravine. On my band, this is my drummer Phil's from the 80s. This is just incredible. But it's got a honk. It goes ding, and that's the Soundgarden ring. That's the, rock and roll ring, the John Bonham. What key is that ring in? I don't think it really matters. But for me personally, I don't worry about that too much. I just tune the drums to where they sound good to me. So the toms, just tuned to have good sound, generally speaking. But like I said, this drum set was tuned by the drum doctor out of Los Angeles, so I'm trying to keep them faithfully close to what they were. So we're talking about kick drum and tonal qualities. So this little mic adds the snap of the beater, but on the other side, I have a vintage Bach 195, which is same as Sound Deluxe 195. So the way I work without using EQ on a kick drum is if the drummer's playing, and sometimes the bands are like, oh, I can't hear the kick drum, or can we get, and usually you would reach for an EQ and start EQing the hell out of the drum to make it somehow have snap. All I do is I just raise up this mic, and it gives me the snap of the beater with the low end outside the drum. And that's how I use the drums for no EQ. Same with the snare. If I want a little bit more top end out of this, I start to crank more of the bottom. You can compress it. Toms have these toms, like I said, these are Lawton toms. These are brand new. Really good reflection. Even those cymbals are right above it. It's really nice to be able to get the tonal out of this. Now, where I place the drums, I usually kind of have them like this, where they're looking down right here. But you can get away with pointing them like that. It just depends how the drummer is. You can adjust them. I usually have the drummer play a fill, and I'll have, I know, no pun intended. My drummer's name is Phil, so when I say that, it's always funny. Hey, we have a friend from Poland tuning in. I gotta say, you're a lucky man. There's a lot of Russian mics I love. I love some Octavia 19s. They're super cheap. They made a billion of them out there, and they're incredible ribbon mics. Also, any of the older Octava families, which you get into the Lomos, or they come from your side of the world. I love it. Welcome. So if you're tuning in, the subject was drums and music and recording all instruments of why I don't use EQ. So I'm already explaining kind of a breakdown of I got this top mic and the bottom mic. I'm adding the sizzle of the bottom to add the top end. On my kick drum, I'm adding this little tiny lavalier that's right above the beater. As you can tell, just hanging right there. Gives me really cool sounds, and then I use the outside for the low end. Now for this record I was working on, a local band called Super Gloom, I wanted some options. I usually use a John Bonham or a single overhead, which I can change that out with 67s, 87s, D19s, 160s, a single coal. But I use kind of like 3 drum sets within one. So once again, we're talking about how do I get detail out of the drums without EQing it. I may use 13 or 14 mics on the drums, but they're meant to be in kind of to give me a style. So within this drum set, I have a kick, or let's say the outside kick, the snare, single overhead, and then I got the floor tom. The distance between the snare and that are about 3 drumsticks or 2.5. The distance from the snare to that mic is 3 drumsticks to 2.5. I think these are set closer to 3 or just below 3. And what I do is I pan this all the way to the right, and then I pan this all the way to the left. And then I bring in the kick and the snare, and you will be blown away on how insane that sounds. These are warm audio 67s. Now I'm at a studio where we really have real 67s, 87s. We have actually the mics from Pink Floyd. For a while, I had a real 67 up here, and because it's such a high quality mic, it picks up everything. It was beautiful. But what I love about these, even though they call these a 67, I kind of wish they would brand them something else, like a badass tube mic or something, because they're so dark and they're fat and they're huge. So when I put this on a drum set, I get the biggest tube sound on that, and the power supply is hanging out over there. And on this one, so I have two mics giving me this massive like Zeppelin sound. So I have a Zeppelin kit, but on this kit, I put up 2 Coles. I have 1 Cole kind of on the outskirts, even though there's no hi-hat. Like it's a little bit on the outskirts of the hi-hat, and this cymbal giving me where I'm sitting would be the left side, but I guess if you're looking at the drums, it'd be the right side. Then I have this one kind of over the ride, but kind of looking over the floor tom. And that's kind of how I have it. So this is kind of on the outskirts of the cymbals, looking over the floor tom, not above a cymbal. And then this one's on the outskirts of the ride and the hi-hat. Then I have a center one. So I have, once again, when we talk about not EQing the drums, and not using EQ when I'm mixing or tracking. And for those who are hanging out, I'm hanging out my own spot. This is my own drum set. These are gobos I made that I put them on sawhorses. So I bought these and made these, put them on sawhorses. And my theory is the low end can go out the bottom. So I'm not really making the drums sound like they're in a vacuum or in a closet. But also this controls the upper frequencies, like the cymbals, gives me a little weight on the toms. I have the same thing on this side. So that's a sawhorse from Home Depot for like 29 bucks. And then I went and bought 2 panels out of the local newspaper, and then I framed them. And I put that frame on the sawhorse and I move them around. And like I said, the reason I didn't enclose it all the way to the floor is that I actually like for the sound to be able to escape. That's called kind of a bass trap. You want to have the low end kind of go out into that corner and kind of get lost behind that. Behind me, I have the same kind of thing, but this one is on the ground. So back to the drums. No EQ on the drums. What am I doing? I talked about double miking the snare, double miking that. Within this drum set of 13 mics, I have the John Bonham Zeppelin setup. I have traditional overheads for left and right, miking of the kick, traditional, and nothing crazy or special about that. But I do have options for putting, like people put a crotch mic here. I did a session where I put a D19 right in here. Actually, I'm excited to let you know that I'm getting 6 of the Warm Audio D19s, and I'm going to test them against. I have real D19s, and I have a D24, which is the same internals as the D19, which is Ringo Starr. So I'm excited about that to test them. But usually I'll put a D19 right here, and I run that into a Shure like level lock, and that gives me that kind of distorted sound. So all right, so now we're talking. I have a traditional drum set. I've got the John Bonham drum set within here, and then I've got, you know, the overheads, which can give me that. I've also spot mic'd the hi-hat and spot mic'd the ride. Now, this is that question of when people say you're using too many mics. Dan, what's up, Mr. Shapiro? What's up? Dan is a great guitarist of a band I recorded. I met him in China. And when he came to the U.S. with his wife, and he just had a baby, I recorded him and his wife out here in Los Angeles. Dan is a dear friend. Dan's great to see you. So, like I said, I'm have these mics on for close mic. And the reason is sometimes I record bands that I don't know what they're going to do. And I've done it before where I get lazy and I don't put up this mic or I don't put up that mic. There's a point in the song where the drummer is hitting the bell and he's got some kind of thing that's like with the song of a 1, 2, 3, 1, and I just can't. I don't have it. So they didn't put a mic on it. If I crank this overhead and he's playing really loud, it just sounds terrible. So I kind of cover all my bases with some close miking, hi hat. I know Steve Albini, who showed me how to record, doesn't really believe in hi hats. I like recording bands that I can at least guide them to be kind of like 70s Devo, punk rock, the Dead Kennedys, even Led Zeppelin. A closed hi hat is beautiful, and that's why I picked these mics, which are D224Es. They just sound wonderful. Even if it opens up or he crashes it or does something, they never sound outrageous or annoying. So I've spent a lifetime, maybe 15 years until I found these AKG D224Es. There's my little original gravity wave microphone company on that. So once again, when we talk about, I'm not using EQ. If I want to bring a point to the drum set, I can bring in a little bit of the hi-hat. And it sounds really beautiful when these are all bombastic and he's playing super loud, but he's playing the ride. When I bring up this mic in the mix, it just sounds like I just used the best EQ on the overheads, but I'm not. So all these drums get summed into a bus. And that means I only have a left and right that's controlling all these drums. So I set them and I balance them the way I think a drum set sounds. So I can get really evil with it. The bus has a API 2500 plug-in compressor. It just really rocks. So that's kind of my theories on drum sets. Now, speaking of Albini, yes, he was a dear friend, and it's really sad that he passed. And when I learned how to record from Albini, I had flown to Chicago and he let me stay there for a week because he had recorded my own band called Distortion Felix. He was nice enough to give me a list of gear to buy, and that's why I bought a 2N16. I bought a TAC Scorpion, which is a British console. He said, get a British console. I did. I eventually ended up getting a Neotech. But one thing I learned from Albini is in 1998, when we recorded with him, he used on his drums a single Beyer 160, which was right over the drummer. And then he had two Sheps with extended low end, which were picking up almost in the same way I use them. Because I remember I took really good notes, and his mics were kind of over the tom and then on the outside of the cymbals. And that's how he used them. And those are Sheps. They weren't ribbons, but they were condensers, but really dark and really accurate. So also, he had Coke bottles on the floor. Coke bottles are Altex M11s. They're very rare. They're hard to find. He told me not to really bother with them because they break down. They need a lot of servicing. Of recently, I've had a few pairs and I've sold them for that same reason. But being an analoger, he has Sony C37s, which are incredible. These are real 50s, 60s tube microphones that I put on the floor like Albini did. These are both set for Omni. I have them on plywood, and then I've goboed them. I want the sound pressure of the drums coming in, and these add such weight to the drum set. So once again, I've got my Zeppelin, I've got my traditional, I've got my hi-hat ride for if I need that. I have my kick drum control over the front and the beater side, snare, top and bottom. Then I have these massive room sounds, and the closest I can say to this is it's very Albini, and a reference would be to check Ronnie Montrose had Sammy Hagar singing with them. They have a song called Rock Candy. That was done at Sunset Sound. This is a very rock candy sound. I say even more than Albini, but I love it. Now, my theory is we have some kind of vinyl flooring here. When I initially put them on that, I just, for whatever reason, I didn't like the way it sounded. When I have it on this plywood, I don't know. I don't know if it's just me being weird, but I really love it. So behind that, I have this, which is just another really cool secret. I just get a mic stand, I make it in a T, and then I have a producer's blanket hang over the top. When I put this in front of the drummer, when he's sitting back here and he's playing, it's a nice sound pressure that comes back to you of the kick drum. When he's hitting his toms, he's getting this deep sound coming back. But behind it, I actually have hard surfaces as well. A little bit more of a bass trap. So the sound goes around it, bounces around. It's not coming back to them. Those are crooked. These are all crooked. These are producer blankets. They're not walls or there are walls behind it, but it's cupboard. There's a bookshelves behind it. These are producer blankets. So I've kind of taken out the room the best I could, which is just producer blankets everywhere. I got gobos. I've enclosed the drum set so the toms are within this, so they sound deep. The kick drum sounds deep because it hits that. Just the sound is captured here for the low end. Same with this one. The hi-hats and cymbals are not bad. On the back walls, I've got producer blankets just hanging here, dead in the room. But this is where the magic is. I have these as tube mics that are picking up just the largeness of the drums. So my phone's about to die. If it gets cut off, then my phone died. I'll try to make it quick. So anyways, that's the whole deal about my drum setup. So I'll move through this quick. We have a bass rig in here. It was in here. I just did some bass overdubs. That is a flip top. I usually have a FET 47 on that, or a Beyer 380, which is an incredible bass mic. The singer and the bands are all out here. I just did acoustic guitars. That is a Neumann KM84, a real one. And I will say, I didn't really care about these until Thomas turned me on to these a few years ago, and these are incredible. And then I had, out in front of the acoustic was an AEA R88, which is just darn incredible. So I had that in front of the drums. In front of the acoustic, which was kind of here, facing him sitting down there. So then I put guitars in here. But once again, how do I get away with no EQ is that we have a lot of different amps. And the band was in last night recording with me, and every time we did something, I would switch out to a different amp. So now I'm going to walk in the back before my phone dies so I can get some power on it. Taking you through my studio, our studio at Analoger with Thomas Cribben. Cool racks of effects. Now we're in my spot. I'm mixing a band. Let me get a little power in here. I'm mixing a band today called Dead Senses. Now I had a few postings on them, but so I'm getting a little power on my phone here. This is my setup. I'm still live, still doing it. Okay, so if you look at my gear, I don't really have any EQ. These are all just preamps. When you look over here, I have outboard gear, compressors, but Thomas did get a pair of these Pultecs, and I have used them a little bit on acoustic. So even though most of my life I've not used any EQ, just about 2 months ago, these came in. Guys like Bob Clearmountain, dudes that have been making records a long time, that have kind of been born into royalty, where they just have always worked at great studios. If you have, from day one, lived through Pultecs, and you set it and forget it to whatever you know that has worked. So Bob Mountain, who's going to tell Bob Clearmountain to, not use a Pultec on kicks and snares? He just used them because he knows that they sound amazing. So, got a little power. On last night's session, the guitars went into AS78 by Audioscape, which is a copy or a revision of a real 1178, and we have another one. So I put my guitars in the compressor. When we did acoustic guitars, I did this. This is a BA6A, which is an incredible unit by RCA. These are smoking. So the acoustic went into that. Well, actually, first, I had the acoustic in this, and then I had the acoustic in this. And the guitars, I tracked them in this. So I did commit. I always commit to compression. This is what I use for bass guitar. These are the sneak cheeks right here. These are A3As by Audioscape, and these are basically 500 LA3As, which are incredible. Oh, really quick, do you use the low-end trick learned from Steve Levine for kick drum sub? You know what? I do that. There's a few records I made last year and the year before that I did use that. If you didn't know about that, you can check out one of my videos past maybe about a few months ago, and I did that technique, which was really cool. Um, but yeah, I do that technique when needed. If you find yourself in that position, it's a great technique. So, and then I have these, which are reamps. These are crickets. I have a video about that of using these. So the way these work is, I have an outcoming of that. I this makes this makes a chirp sound, and then you hold this in front of your speaker, and if it lights up red, if it lights up red, your sound source. I'm gonna get an argument about that, but polarity is opposite. Anyways, I have the crickets for testing gear. You could test stuff to see if you have to need to switch. But sometimes you have cables. Sometimes you have mics that have been wired up wrong. That are even if you have gear from the 60s and 70s, they're wired up in reverse. So if you're doing a drum set and you happen to put, like, let's say you have a vintage Pultec on your snare, that could make the snare out of phase with the rest of the drum set. So you just have to be aware of what gear you have that's working. Let's see, any questions in here? Did you test some Jay-Z mics? You know what? I want to. My friends have all the Jay-Z mics, and man, they say they're smoking. I just don't know anyone. Let's see. Any questions in there? Make sure to say hey to someone. Do you use low and trick? What are the questions? Well, most people are just hanging out. So that's how I track, is using some compression. I only have preamps. Now, when you talk about preamps and tonals, that matters as well. These are MA5s. I call these like brick wall preamps. You could put a mic on a jet engine and you're never gonna overload any of these. Actually, all my preamps are almost all Brent Averill. These, though, are one of the only preamps that I know of that if you lower this down and you put it on a super loud sound, like say a snare, the guy's hitting it as hard as he wants, this will not overload until you turn it on. So MA5s, Avitas worked for Brent Averill. Then I have three Brent Averills, and then I have another Brent Averills. These are APIs. So this is kind of like a soft Neve. These are APIs. This is one of my favorite. This is a DMP, which is more of a Neve. So why do I have a collection of, and these are Cytex, which are like Neotex, like Steve Albini had these, and that's why I bought these. I have one here, I have 4 here, 4 here, 4 there, and I got 4 over there. So that's a lot, but that's technically a Neotech console. Okay, so why, when I'm tracking and I'm not using any EQ, why am I using these preamps? Kick, snare, bottom snare, always. It just is the massive drum sound. That's when people go, if they go, oh man, it gets great drum sounds, or if they don't say that, man, it gets terrible drum sounds. Whatever they say, that's what I use these for, because they're massive sounding. Then the toms and cymbals and ribbons, I use all Cytex. That's why I have a lot of them, because I have like tom, hi-hat, 2 overheads, 2 rooms, bass guitar, and maybe bass DI if I have another one over here. And that's pretty much my whole setup. And the reason I use these don't have any transformers. So there's no color, but it just makes the mic sound darn beautiful. So my Altex 2 mics, or my Sony C37s, or a Mojave MA37 into these, or my hi-hat mics and ride mics, these sound absolutely amazing because they're not coloring the sound, the Cytex. You can get those on eBay for about $900 to $1,000. They're amazing. And then these ones kind of dirty. You can gain them out, you can crank this, and you get a little bit more of a harmonic distortion. But now the reason I love about APIs, because that's like Led Zeppelin, Van Halen, they had massive API consoles in old studios. And this one in particular, this Brent Averill, I had taken this Avitas, and it comes with a massive power supply for 1 API. The ratio to the 5, that you could say this is a 500 to, with being powered by that, It's one of my best sounding APIs. Now, if you look at this one, I've got 4 APIs. Even though they're brand Averill, they're running into an older API power supply, not a new one, an older one. That still is great, but it doesn't sound as good as one API with that massive transformer power amp. So I pick my APIs and my Neves carefully. So most of the guitars, like if I have 2 guitar players, I'll run one into the Neve and then I'll run one into the API. If I'm doing a selection of microphones, let's say I have like a Ruben mic, a BK5, I run the BK5 into the Neve, and then I'll run some of the other Ruben mics or the 57 or 56 Unidyne into the APIs for a super tight sound. These are how I don't need an EQ, because these all have a tight sound. These have a full dark sound, even murky sound. And that's the difference between the Neves. The APIs are, you can imagine them being like kind of like quicksand for audio, and the APIs are kind of like lightning for audio. And these Cytex are just pure microphone sounds. So I am particular in how I use all these sounds. So that kind of runs down the preamps, and I mentioned that I track with all these. So when I have a band come in, and let's say we've done tracking drums, and I've got a rough bass, and I've got these basic building blocks of a record, and I really want to make them sound good, I need to hear them well. These are ATC's 12s, which are all day Sweetwater, $2,000. I mean, they just rock. I have NS10s, and I did a video a while ago about my speaker setup, so I'm not going to go into detail. You can look back maybe 2 video ago, and I'll talk about that. When I'm listening back to my audio, if I'm sitting here, now this is something that I spent a lot of money on that may not be worth it for you, but this Allen Smart is doing nothing except my playback. And it's stereo, even though you see one side. You can get these with 2, but one was like, I think, almost 3,000 or 3,200 bucks for the 2. This was on, at the time I bought it, was about 2,500 bucks. And I, for 25 years or more, I listen back to my audio through this. And they call this a radio compressor. So as I'm tracking, I'm constantly hearing kind of an SSL sound come back to me. And that helps me make decisions with all the tonal qualities, the mics, the drums, when I'm listening to the track, my speakers, how much I'm cresting. So right now on a playback, I was messing around, and I usually go maybe ratios 2, 3. I mean, I used to use 4. I kind of like it now when I go to about 2. And if you lower this down, it doesn't pump as much, but it gets massively loud, and then I can control the levels. But in my Pro Tools, I'm always listening to it what I would consider like a 0. And that's why I think I get a massive sound. Now, it's a lot of money to spend that I'm not using this. But and actually, in all fairness, when I print, I then print out of this back to Pro Tools. So I have the sound that I've captured and I've been used to, and nothing changes. Now, I was really weird in the old days about if you print it in the box, if you take it out of the box, I'm just unsure if that's what does it really sound like. So I go out of Pro Tools into my Allen Smart, but it's coming through this unit, which is an inward connections discrete monitor system. I really love the way this sounds, because I used to have a Coleman, and it was the same way, a Coleman 3. And I had it, so out of this unit, it goes to this, and then I print it. So this does have something to do with the sound. This does have something to do with the sound. And hold on a second, we have a question. Hey Manny, I stuck a CK67 capsule in a beat up SE73 off eBay for 50 quid. Sounds amazing. Alrighty. Well, that's kind of the theory, man. You can get some mics. I believe the capsules. If you talk about condensers, I do believe you can upgrade a lot of mics with a nice capsule. And if you did 30 vintage and 30 new capsules, the variation would be very limited depending on the sound source that you have in front of it. So once again, I'm capturing my sound, I'm committing to it. So when bands come in, they go, oh, we love the playback. Well, I'm not going to tell you I'm a genius. It sounds great because of this. So that's my playback. So now I have a band in, we're recording. So Because I'm talking about not using any EQs, I have funky guitars. This is a Japanese guitar of a Dove, a copy of a Dove. This is my own custom. I had a shop make this for me. It's some kind of ES3035. It's really strange, but everybody that plays it loves it. It's super easy to play. It has a massive sound. Poor man's ES335. This is my Chava Servine guitar, which is pretty insane. I love it. It's a really wicked guitar. It's a Univox made of the 60s. I've seen some early Queens of the Stone Age. Now, I didn't play this because he had used it. I just saw them. So I'm picking guitars for overdubs that have character. This is my bass player, Mondo Lopez. What's up, Mondo? He's not here, but he has this. This is my pride and joy, which is kind of a unspoken thing about the studio. I had a broken string. This guitar is a Boogie Body or Mighty Might. These parts from this guitar came out of the same box that Eddie Van Halen got his guitars in the 80s. Charvel used to be located in San Dimas, and Carlos Cavasso from Quiet Riot and my friend Anthony Penalosa, also known as Gus, had gone down to Charvel, and everybody knew Eddie and everybody knew about the B-Box, and they picked these parts out of the B-Box, which Eddie Van Halen picked his parts out of. The telltale sign of this guitar being a crafty 80s kind of shredder guitar is the Floyd Roses didn't used to have locking nuts here, and they had these bars across that would keep the strings on. So if you did a dive bomb on the whammy, the strings wouldn't come out of this nut socket and just keep it in. So it's really weird. There's no sign, but that's a Floyd Rose. This is probably like a Mighty Might or Boogie Body bridge. These pickups are just outrageous. This guitar sounds like, I can't tell you, and how weird. There's no plate. There's never been a plate. It was just screwed in. And old style tremolo system, some copper tape in there. But this guitar sounds as close as you can to a real Charvel from the 80s. And technically, it is. But there's no label except the word of Anthony Penalosa, and I believe him. And so these guitars lived under my friend's bed for like 15 years. And I eventually bought it and had it was almost ruined, but kept the dirt on it. It just stays the way it is. But this is my, if you look at some videos where I did a Van Halen cover, or if I do any really shredding, this is my guitar. So that is for a shredder. If I have a guy come in, and most bands, even indie bands, they love that guitar the way it plays. They really love this guitar. So when I'm looking for a Telecaster, it's rock and roll, I use this one. But then if I really want a classic sound, then I'll use a real Telecaster. This is my 8-string bass. It's amazing. It's from the 60s. Hendrix used these. Lemmy from Motorhead used these. It's a secret weapon of studios. I have bass players play really melodic parts that they did on their bass over with this Cheap Trick, live at Budokan, all that stuff. Those are 8s and 12-string basses. So I'm picking guitars for different tonal qualities. Once again, not using EQ. I'm using guitars to get different sounds. I have, here's an Echoplex. This is a full tone. That's a tube tape echo. Here is my solid state. This EP3 is what Eddie Van Halen and Jimmy Page used. The tube ones were basically used by like Billy Gibbons, Eric Johnson. Here is my Shure Level Lock. Really super cool unit if you can find them. There's a little, you can see where it says limiter on it. If you can get these off of eBay when you can find them. This is a Maestro ring modulator. Once again, I add this and barely put this on a bass guitar synth, and that's Deep Purple. Anything you hear with keyboards with Deep Purple, it went into one of these. So I had to always find a Maestro ring modulator. Once again, the subject was recording without EQ, and what are the tools of the trade that I use. All these guitars are like $400, $500. I've spent $300 repairing them. I have a really massive pedal board that's just connected all the time. These are all my pedals. Earthquaker was nice enough to always support me. And this is one of the sleepers here, a full tone Catalyst. Oh my God, I can't tell you how nice on a live gig that can make your guitar sound fat but not harsh like a fuzz. I got an 80s Rat, which I've had since the 80s, same one. Then I have a microsynth, Death by Audio robot pedal. If you listen to Chava Savine, if you could find one of the links, we have a record called Uno. That's basically like 3 or 4 solos. Data Corruptor is another one I use on a solo. Microsynth is another one. And here is the Benson Echarec, or the copy of it. And so yeah, these are all, and also shout out to Ulf. This is something you can get. It's a DIY robot mic arm. And let's see, do I have the box for it? Oh, and then I have drawers with synths, different synths. Here they are. These, and that's Gabe from the Locust, God rest his soul. These go with the DIY robot arm. I don't know if I can, later on tonight, I'll try to put it in the link for that. But that's how it works, and that's miscellaneous stuff. I'm getting myself a little bit of power here because my phone is dying. So we've covered some effects, tape delays. Subject is, why am I not EQing things? Because I have weird guitars. Rounding it down. So we have some effects. I just ran this AMS live with the keyboard. Sounded absolutely amazing. Then we have, this is a new Mellotron. You'd be shocked, these are affordable. It's not the tape one, but it sounds incredible. If you can, do yourself a favor in your life, get a Juno 60. Incredible. We just did synths with that, and it is so crazy. Okay, so now we're talking about amps. This is an expensive amp, but this is a color. This cabinet is not expensive. I bought it for 200 bucks, but I put vintage 65s and they're vintage 75s. I know everybody talks about 25s. I'm telling you, Eddie Van Halen to some people, their secrets are to get higher wattage speakers. Eddie Van Halen used to put JBLs, and Randy Rhoads had, he didn't have JBLs, he had Altex, Eminence, I think. Super high wattage speakers that would take loud sounds. So I have 65s, which I think sound better with pedals. This head sounded incredible. I know this is illegal. I did run it into a Variac, and even though it says 70, it was actually on the meter 98 volts. So from 110 or 120 down to 98, it's kind of suffocating the head, and it sounded incredible. So when we did guitars on the record I was working on, we ran through different amps. Sorry, I have to get a little power on my phone. I feel like my car's running out, and I keep on going to the gas station and putting a little money in the tank. So when we're doing overdubs on the record I'm on, once again, the subject is no EQ. I know, not the Catalyst. The Catalyst is killer, man. All right, let's see. I wish I got some circuit bender. I mean, you guys are all talking my language, man. So I got a little bit more juice. So this is a Magnetone. We use this on half the guitars. This Bandmaster, oh my God, we're talking Nirvana, but just why did Hendrix, why did Fender, why did Marshall try to copy this? Because I'm gonna cuss, God damn it, that head sounds incredible with this Marshall cabinet. So I had one guitar player play through that, and then to make sure that the other guitar player didn't sound like him, I ran him into the Marshall. Here's a 70s tube reverb pedal, a reverb box. Has really tubes in the back. Once again, gives me the sound that I'm trying to be creative with. We do another guitar overdub. I have a guy use my Silvertone Twin 12. This is a mini Roland Jazz Chorus that I use for really clean guitars. Those speakers I had replaced with 60s Jensens. So it's a weird combo, but it's beautiful. This is my Mini Brute, which has distortion. Almost all my bass guitars, I run into this. This is a PV Audition 20. I went out to the desert with Dave Ketching, and he just told me to buy this. This is as good as the Decade. So the tip of the day, Audition 20. I gotta tell you, this is mind-blowing for overdub. So this is how I'm getting away with no EQ. I'm using this amp, that amp. I'm having the guy play a Telecaster Les Paul into this. I'm having the other guy play a hollow body into the Magnetone. I am having the solos done in the Bandmaster. And that's not even, I'm just getting started. This Vox right here, what is this called? God, I forget the name of it. But that Vox is killer. This is the Chavez Ravine amp. If you ever hear the intro to Manny's Mic Locker, this is the amp. It's a solid state bass amp. So what am I doing here? That's what I'm doing. So all my overdubs are picking weird little amps, big ones, loud. And Thomas has come in a few times and he's heard the guys playing back here and he cannot believe in how low they are and then how massive they are sounding in my rig. So it's all perspective. So when I spend my time and the bands are hanging out and I'm having them swap guitars, use pedals, use guitars, what I'm not doing is having the guy plug into my computer and sitting there going through a list of plugins. Do you like that? Do you like that? Nope. We go into an amp. He gets goosebumps because he's never sounded as good as he is right there. And then I basically record him. Now that's where we get in the world of then microphones. So what am I doing on the mic? So here's my mic box of goodies. So once you get the amps, then you get the guitars, then you got the guitar player, then you start choosing the mics. Here's a 421. Here's another Unidyne 56. This is my personal BK5. And last night we used the BK5, the Altec 633A, and this is amazing. This is new from AEA, called a KU5. And then we were doing vocals for the band I'm mixing today, and we did all the vocals on a Mojave MA37, which is a kind of a, not a copy, but a kind of a revisioned Sony C37. So that is the plethora of the rundown of how you get cool recordings without having to use EQs, plugins. Now, if you can't afford that and you're in your house and you can only afford plugins, then just do that. But if you can, go to a thrift store, and after time, you'll start accumulating weird guitars that you think are cool. I got, like I said, weird little synths. This is an electroharmonic synth. There's a little mini boot in there. This is a Casio. You know, I have a drawer with some pedals in here. There's an Earthquake, a Rainbow Machine, cowbell. There's another electroharmonics. This is a custom pedal I had. It was a Vox Fuzzwall. It sounds like Jimmy Page, and I had the guy put it in a box. So this is my kind of wah-wah sound without having the wah-wah. I just click it on, it goes from fuzz to tone. And instead of having the pedal which goes up and down, this is my sweep knob. Whoa, sorry about all the noise. This is my sweet knob. So, end of the subject. Why we don't use EQ is because we get crazy cool guitars, crazy cool amps for every single part. Don't be lazy. Mic it up. Put it through something new. Running through some big boys, running through some classics. And then, you know, I ran live a keyboard. We did the Juno, and I ran it into the AMS, which was an incredible reverb. And I had it going through the full tone echo. So that's just the synth. And that's just one of everything. When I did the guitars last night, every guitar, well, one of the guys I had run into my classic Echoplex, and the other guy, I had him run into this tube. So I'm just changing up the variables everywhere to make sure when I print it and I listen back that there's room. Now, there was times when I had the guitar player play out of that Marshall, and the first guy didn't sound good, and that's why I moved him to the Bandmaster. But then that opened up the Marshall for the next guitar player. I had him run to the Marshall. So if you're getting late to this, it's just basically on the subject of when I'm making a record, how do I choose all these different sounds so I don't use EQs and plugins. And like I said, the guys are going into real amps that I just showed you, and I'm trying to get real cool sounds. And they're not just like plugging in and they're maybe like, okay, cool, let's mic it up and let's go. We really work on the tone. If that mic, I mean, I had it where I had a BK5 on the Marshall, And it did, as the guy got louder and more fuzzy, it just didn't work out. So I had to put another mic. I think I put the Unidyne 56 instead of the BK5, and that gave me the tone I wanted. So instead of doing an EQ, I switched out on the mic. Well, I've got to get back to mixing. This is my little Manny treat. Hopefully you guys dug it. This is in the middle of a company called Analoger. It's a massive warehouse. I'm in the middle. So if you walk out of my room, as we wind this up, this is what my room looks like. I got all these chairs. That was from a restaurant. They put wheels on it. Everything has wheels. That dresser has wheels, so I can roll it around. All my racks are modular. They're all connected. Everything can be reconnected, moved around. This is a wonderful mastering desk by Sterling. This is from a brothel. It's a bedboard. And the back here looks tight. I have all my wires, once again, in a little mommy hook. When I need to go out of my Pro Tools, I have them all labeled right here. I can run these to amps, reamp them. The snakes coming in from the other room are all running there, and it's tight. This is clean. Vintage mics, walking around here. More synths, Art Odyssey, Dweezil's Apples amp, George Martin's amp, AC/DC amp. Here's the little back room that I mentioned. I didn't cover these amps, but these are all, this Fender is incredible. I think that's out of Neil Young's studio. All classic Fenders, different sizes, and they get smaller. And you can't be prejudiced. This little amp right here, this Polytone, you saw the bigger one that I have, the Mini Brood. This one is special. I think that's an 8-inch speaker. This came out of Indigo Ranch, where Korn, Metallica, not Korn, God, Ross Robinson did a lot of records there. What is that band called? Anyways, if you look at Ross Robinson, a lot of them ran through that. Here's a Matchless JCM 800. This Vox is incredible. Here's a little Squonker amp, which is nice. And once again, we got more pedals back here. So we're not using EQ. Here's another amp. We're using mics, pedals. There's actual, from Crossroads, I think this is Eric Clapton's. Thomas has got some crazy good guitars. We got a 12-string, a real sick Les Paul. Here's a like a baritone guitar. There's another, he has an 8-string after I bought mine. He bought his. We got a wicked Telecaster tuned to Nashville. I mean, we're going. And then we got mics that are just, what do you want? You want some vintage dynamics? You know, they're all there. These mics are actually from AC/DC. Compass Point or something like that, where they did Back in Black. He's got these mics from all those bands that did Devo to Back in Black, Iron Maiden. They're all there. And that's kind of looking at the drummer. So if I'm the guitar player singer, I'm looking this way into the drum set. These are all some vintage gobos. These are gobos I have. I got these out of the paper for $100. So you don't have to say we're rich guys. You just got to find them. Real hardwood. Then I bought these plexiglass shields. And then that's it. All right, everyone. I'll try to answer your questions when I get back there. Hope you guys dug it. This is Analoger. And it's a company that does memorabilia. What's up, Dre? And they have incredible things here. If you look up Analoger online, that's Eric Clapton's Blackie, White Stripes drums, OK Computer drums over there, 6-7 Eddie Van Halen guitars signed by him. What's his name from the Wall of Sound? That's his actual piano, the guy that killed someone. He's crazy, dude. That's actually really Jerry Garcia's rig right there. These are all Grateful Dead. Power amps, for instance, like if you look at this miniature Wall of Sound right here from the Grateful Dead, those were Macintosh power amps. Here are the actual power amps, if you can believe that. And before my phone dies, that is really Elvis Presley's motorcycle. Yep, it says Elvis. His name registered to him, one of his last motorcycles he registered. Elvis has left the building. It really does say Elvis on it. That's his actual license plate. So they have crazy stuff here. This is an insane I forgot what the story is on this tape machine, but I don't know. Maybe this belonged to the Grateful Dead. I'm not sure. All right, everyone. Analoger signing off. I hope you guys are all well. Leave me a message. I'll try to get to any questions you guys have. Talk to you soon.